Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord. What a great season we're in right now, right before the Christmas season, right before the birth of our King. We celebrate that. It is interesting the Palestinians moved their headquarters from Ramallah to Bethlehem, the birthplace of God. So we're looking at all the things that point to the coming of the Lord. It's so amazing and specific, the things that are happening every week. You know, when I first started this, I thought I'd do it 2 weeks. Now it's going on many years, but something's happening every single week that is a marker or a sign or something that points to His return. You know, Jesus rebuked them. He said, hey, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of visitation. So He wanted them to know. So let's look at the things that happened this last week. So many things are flawlessly set up for the Ezekiel 38 war. We talked about that last week. Even the nations that have separated from those nations listed, Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Years ago, Saudi Arabia was completely Israel's nemesis and adversary, and now Saudi Arabia is hooked up with Israel. Why is that a big deal? Saudi Arabia and Jordan are not mentioned with the nations that attack Israel in the Ezekiel 38 war. So in our lifetime, you're watching the setup for that. So let's pick up to what happened this last week. Man, some bizarre stuff happened this last week. This was something that really freaked me out. The Jews were allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. First time in many years. Usually they get arrested. The status quo, Jordan takes care of basically the facilities of the Temple Mount. So the Jews were not allowed to even pray on the Temple Mount. Well, this last week they were able to be up there and prayed and did not get arrested. Usually the police arrest them. Why is this a big deal? This year, 2019, is the first year they had a sacrifice on the edge of the Temple Mount. The year before, the police arrested them. This year, they did not arrest them. So those are two things that are pointing to what their future is. They'll be able to be on the Temple Mount and pray, and eventually they'll be able to do sacrifice. Because right after the rapture, it goes back to Old Testament time, and they'll start having sacrifices again. And man, they're ready. The Temple Mount Institute is absolutely ready to do this. So another thing that happened this last week that was a real marker for me was Iran got into a pact with Russia. You should have seen the picture of the Soviet Union's bombers coming across Iranian airspace. What Iran said is Russia can use their airspace to bring their bombers down into Syria. Now that's an exact setup for the Ezekiel 38 war, which is wild. Why'd they do that? Remember, American generals were in Israel a couple of weeks ago. We talked about this, and they got into a pact with America, kind of a coordinated effort against Iran, because it looked like Iran was about to attack some of our bases. If you watched a couple of weeks ago, Iran mentioned we got 22 American bases in our sight. So Iran is continuing to do these things that are kind of scary. Even the British Navy said this last week that Iran hasn't stopped doing its provocative things in all the area of the Middle East. So it's intriguing. England even says that Iran's scary. Don't mess with Iran. So you're watching it right now, right in front of your eyes, specifically the coordinated effort with Russia and Iran. Many more things keep happening. Russia was caught with its spy ship right off the coast of America, literally where our nuclear submarine base is. A little bit too close for comfort right there, so that's another thing that kind of was alarming. Many more things keep happening, though, that are kind of markers for what's coming. You got Turkey obtained the technology for opticopters, this machine gun flying helicopter that can pick a target 650 feet away and hit it from 650 feet. You've got Turkey sending out drones over some of their drilling in Cyprus. Israel signed a new energy agreement with Egypt over gas. So you got all these things setting up for what's going to happen right after we leave. It's pretty remarkable to see the nations get into positions and the armies get into positions. This came out. This is pretty cool. Of course, America has a pact for the Israeli and Palestinians and has an idea of what will happen with that. It looks like it got leaked to the press. Part of that pact is that it'll be called the new Palestinian state. And it will include Gaza and the West Bank, but yet Jerusalem will still be controlled by Israel. So some of that got leaked out this last week, so it's interesting to see the pressure for that. Now, I believe it will not come to pass because I believe the Antichrist is going to come on the scene and form a perfect pact for them. So, but you got all these little tentacles of things that are exactly what the Bible said you'd see right before the coming of the Lord. So what's the whole purpose of all these details? Great joy. The Lord, we get into all this, so we'll have a great expectation and great joy. It's not an escape theology, it's a hustle theology, because Jesus Jesus is just about to come. When you see the finish line, you run faster, not slower. So remember, the Lord said, lift up your heads. When you see these things, lift up your heads, your redemption is drawing nigh. So he doesn't want you downtrodden. He wants you excited and wants you happy. So I talk about this when Colleen and I got married. When she was walking down the aisle, she didn't go, oh my God, I'm about to marry Joe. No, she was excited. The whole purpose of all these details are we're about to see Jesus face to face. So let's go to the scriptures and talk about what the Bible said we'd see right before he comes. It's super, super clear, super exact, super precise. Number one, Israel made a nation. Number two, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the generation that sees those two events will not pass away till all is fulfilled. But you have tons more signs, radical. You got the Hebrew language restored. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You got Ezekiel prophesying there'd be fish in the Dead Sea when they show up this year. You had foxes on the Temple Mount a few weeks ago. Lamentation says when you see that, the Temple Mount is desolate, and the rabbis know that means the next temple's getting ready to rebuild. You have the Temple Mount Institute that's there, ready to start having sacrifices. One of the guys that were on the Temple Mount this last week, his last name was Cohen, means priest. Pretty crazy. They mentioned him by name. So you have all these things that lead up to it. The revival of the Roman Empire. You have the Capitol building in Strasbourg, France. That's identical to the Tower of Babel. There's so much going on about that. That's set up for the Antichrist. Pretty crazy. You have many more, though. You have predatory birds. 172 different species of predatory birds start showing up on the land of Israel. I mean, what happens? Right after the Ezekiel 38 war, God calls on the fowl of the air to clean the land up. 7 years later, at the Battle of Armageddon, he calls on the fowl of the air again to clean up the land. So you have the cleanup crew there. Amazing. Many, many more signs. Men will be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. You have all the things that the Bible said you'd see right before his return. I hear people say, well, these signs have all happened before. No, they've never happened before. I hear people go, why would we want to get into this? Well, when you see the finish line, you run faster, not slower. I had a famous evangelist say, Joe, if you preach on the coming of the Lord, you just get everybody's hopes up. I said, duh, that's exactly right. It's the hope that purifies us, even as we're pure. You have all of these signs, and then you go from signs to signals. The Bible says in Genesis that the heavens and the planets would be for signals for us. You had blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles a few years ago. 4 in a row. When's the last time you had 4 blood red moons in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel's made a nation. 1492 the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So you got signals. Then you had the Bethlehem Star this last year. Absolutely radical. You should Google it, YouTube it, and look up the Bethlehem Star. Look at the bonus feature. You had, at the birth of Jesus, you had the 3 planets, Regulus, Venus, Jupiter come together. And this last year, NBC Nightly News said we have a celestial event at the Bethlehem Star, Jupiter, Regulus, Venus again. The constellation was Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. Look up the bonus feature on YouTube for the Bethlehem Star. It shows exactly what happened when Jesus is on the cross at 3 p.m. Absolutely the coolest thing I've ever seen, ever. That the heavens would be so structured that it would show forth the dying of our King on the cross. So, man, we're celebrating Christmas right now. So what do we do about all these signs? The expectation, the joy is to fuel your race to get more done in a short period of time. Help your local church, help your local pastor. Have a wonderful Christmas season. We celebrate God becoming flesh, and we're about to see him face to face. What an awesome time to be on the planet with all these scriptures coming to pass, showing us how close we are to the entrance of the King. Wow, the heavens are going to open up and the King's going to come back. We'll be raptured. We'll go up to meet him in the air, and then 7 years later we'll come back with him at the second coming. Man, great things ahead. Do the will of God. Walk with God. Speak for God. Demonstrate for him. He loves you so much. He wants you happy. He wants you expectant. He wants you hopeful. Have a great week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.